Welcome to the Close the Chapter podcast. I am Kirsten, a licensed marriage and family therapist with a private practice, Pathways to Healing Counseling. Through conversations, education, strategies, and shared stories, we will be closing the chapter on all the thoughts, feelings, people, and circumstances that don't serve you anymore and open the door to possibilities and the real you. You won't want to miss an episode, so be sure to subscribe. Welcome to the Close the Chapter podcast. You made it. You're here and you matter and you're important and you're here for a reason. I'm going to say it all the time so you believe it to be true eventually, because we all feel like we're defective or something's wrong with us or we're not good enough in some form or fashion. And what is the truth is you are loved and you are loved, even if you don't feel like that right in this moment. And I felt compelled to say that for whoever needs to hear that today when you're listening to this episode, because one of the hardest jobs we have on the planet, if we are a parent or working with children in some form or fashion, it can stretch us to no end. It can also be the greatest reward. And it also can, if we're awake enough, welcome us into deeper work. It just goes without saying that when we work with children or we have children, they are going to bring out things in us, our patience. They're going to test and try our patience. They will bring out unhealed traumas that we have not dealt with, unhealed areas of our lives that need attention because they need us to meet their needs. And so it demands us doing our own work. And so I saw this book, Raising Good Humans, and I was like, interesting. I really wanted to dig into it. So I was excited to have our guest on today. Hunter Clarke-Fields is a dynamic, engaging speaker who captivates audiences on TV in front of thousands worldwide. Once a self-proclaimed parenting yeller, puts that in quotes, Hunter transformed her approach and went on to write international best-selling sensation, Raising Good Humans. She is also the creator of the highly acclaimed Mindful Parenting course and teacher training program, as well as host of the popular Mindful Parenting podcast. And she's gone on, she has 2 decades of meditation experience. Her expertise has been featured on major platforms like CNBC, NBC, Fox, The Huffington Post, and in renowned publications. She is on a mission to inspire and guide kids and caregivers towards a meaningful, compassionate living. So we really talk about our own triggers and really managing our own dysregulation as parents, our own reactivity, and how to be a peaceful parent, raising humans that feel secure with themselves. And I hope if you're working with kids or you're a caregiver or you're a parent or grandparent, this episode is helpful for you. Grab the free guide that is fully free if you're on a healing journey at Kirsten, Kristen, Boyce, boice.com/free resources. I just want you to know that I see you. And the fact that you're listening to this podcast says so much about you. You want to evolve, you want to grow, you want to be centered and peaceful and secure and calm and not insecure as a parent or working with kids, because they need that from us. And so those insecure parts will come forward as a parent. And I want you to know you're not alone. You are not alone. And we need to have compassion for ourselves and a community where we can be vulnerable. So share this episode with someone that you are on the journey of healing with. I will preface this episode that Hunter had some construction going on at her home. So there is a little bit of construction in the background. So just kind of notice that we are moving through the conversation despite the construction. And without further ado, enjoy this conversation with Hunter. Here we go. Welcome to this week's Close the Chapter podcast. Are you a parent? Do you work with kids? Do you interact with kids on any level? Maybe grandkids, maybe it's a family member. This episode is for you. Have you ever thought you're going to lose your ever-loving mind as a parent? Or you've yelled or screamed or done things that you bring so much shame and guilt to you that you just want to kind of crawl in a hole sometimes. This episode is for you. If you've had any of those moments, I am so grateful for my guest today. I found her book years ago. Well, when did it come out, actually, Hunter?
December 2019. So,
Yeah, I was going to say it was a while ago. Yeah.
mhm.
So, Hunter, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. Raising Good Humans is the book. Now you've got a workbook, you've got 50 ideas. What's it called? Like everyday
Yeah, Raising Good Humans Every Day,
day.
50 short chapters.
Yes. So, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Kirsten. I'm so happy to be here. Yeah.
I'm so glad you're here. When you said you're a recovering yeller, I was like, okay, so many parents can relate to that. How did you get started on this journey? Really?
Well, I got started from my yelling. Although it kind of depends on when you say it started. I mean, for me, studying about mindfulness started when I was young because I've always been like a really intense kid. I felt things very deeply, You would call me a highly sensitive kid now. And just like by the time I was a teenager, I just needed some relief on my own upbringing and all that. And I found a book by a person who had become my teacher for many years, the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh. I'm sure the listener, you might be familiar. And it was so, so helpful. And so I read about mindfulness and meditation for 10 years and then finally was able to practice. And it really helped a lot. But the recovering yelling part came, of course, after my daughter was born. I don't know, she was maybe 18 months, 2 years old. And that's like that age when they're just like lots of no's coming out. And I know I was not parenting, communicating very skillfully. I'm pretty sure about that. And she, probably more highly sensitive than I am. And she had a big problem with the way I was parenting her. And she would get very upset, have big upset feelings. And my just temper came out multiple times. And I'm sure I was dealing now postpartum anxiety and all kinds of things were happening. And yeah, this temper came out and it was like, I'm one of those people, like a lot of people, like you can get the grades, go to school, I could go to grad school, I could do all these things. And if I set my mind to it, I could do this thing. And then here I was with my kid. And this was exactly what I didn't want to do. This was exactly what I vowed I would not do. And I was listening to parenting coaches, learning even great ways to respond that I couldn't implement in the moment. And I was so filled with shame and frustration. It was just an incredibly hard time. It was a huge catalyst for learning.
Yeah. So our kids wake us up. They're like, hello, you have these wounds, you have this stuff you need to deal with, and they mirror it back to us. And when you're awake, you're going, okay, I don't like how I feel when I get dysregulated. Obviously, you don't like how it feels for you when it gets dysregulated. So you kind of on this journey already, and then really kind of ramped it up when your daughter was 18 months, just to kind of go, okay.
Yeah. My mindfulness practice had kind of fallen out, by the way, as happens with the birth of a child and a small child. And I was listening to parenting coaches and learning good ways to respond. So I was trying to kind of get a handle on things, but I realized this reactivity, the temper just came up again and again and again. No matter how much I decided I didn't want it, or I just would say, it's not going to happen again. It just came up and it wasn't in my control. So I thought, okay, well, this just kind of like thinking that I can choose how I want to respond to my kid is not working. There's obviously stuff happening here. I had the awareness to see, at some point I realized, okay, this is making me feel like when I was a kid and I had big upset feelings and my father would rage at me or spank me or whatever. And so of course, this is like built into my bones, this feeling like that what she's doing is unacceptable. It felt unacceptable to me in my bones because I was taught that in a really early age, in a really, really visceral way. So I realized that just thinking about how I wanted to respond to my kid differently, while it was a very important piece of this, I was going to get nowhere with it unless I went back to the tools that I had started to learn from the mindfulness world about steadying myself, about building that equanimity, about recovering, because the temper and the reactivity were a huge barrier for me for being able to, I could see I was getting disconnected with my daughter. I could see she was scared of me. When I yelled, she was scared of me. And it was creating that disconnection. And it was just heartbreaking. So I really sort of dove back into, okay, and there's an explosion of research in mindfulness. How can this help me get to the place where I can actually say respond in some of the ways I want to respond rather than lose it. I realized that it wasn't something that I had to say to fix in her. It was like I had to soothe this hurt within.
Yeah. You could think of all the strategies in your head, but it was really soothing your insides, your inner child, rather than the right words to say to your daughter.
Yeah. And I think part of it, I had to forgive myself for having it because in many instances, I love my dad. Just want to say that. Sometimes I am still very frustrated, but I love my dad. But there were many times I hated him for the way he would rage at me when I was a kid. We had a very damaged relationship for many, many years. Then I was acting just like him. And so I had to forgive myself for that. And that was interesting because I had to then say, oh, this isn't something I'm choosing. And for anybody who is yelling at your kid or your temper is coming out, we have to acknowledge that it's not something you're choosing. It's not a conscious choice. You are probably actively wanting to choose something different. It's just not working, right? But it wasn't something I was choosing. And it was so looking into the research and the neuroscience, it's like, this is our nervous system. This is our fight, flight, or freeze stress response. Our stress response is seeing our kid as a threat in this moment. I actively didn't want to yell, yet I was yelling. So I had to say, okay, I have to offer myself some forgiveness. I'm not choosing this. I really, really don't want this. And so it was interesting because I also then had to say, for him, I'm pretty sure he wasn't choosing to rage down the hall. And I know that in his upbringing was worse, kind of objectively, than mine in some ways. Like the spankings I got, for him, it was beating with a strap, which was very normal parenting in the 1950s. So yeah, it was this, as I started to kind of build this awareness, and then I started to bring back my mindfulness practice, and that could help me really steady myself, get my feet on the ground enough to be able to handle this, to be able to work through this, to be able to see these hurts and have the steadiness to be able to handle them, and then start to walk back that temper bit by bit by bit, painfully slowly, not as fast as one would like, but painfully slowly. And with still, one is human, but had to walk it back.
I think what you're describing for all of us is what I didn't realize. When we sign up to be parents or when we work with kids, we don't realize that lives our parents' dysregulation, yelling, they're screaming, they're dysregulated, lives, it's like an imprint in our bodies. And like we carry that imprint unconsciously into our relationships, into parenting. And then it's like already programmed in a way.
Yeah.
And I don't think that was ever explained to me that way.
No, you're back in this parent-child relationship. Like there's nothing else in your adult life that would trigger those feelings for you, probably. Like you kind of think, oh, I've healed that. I've recovered for that. I'm good with that. But it's because, I mean, maybe you have to some degree, but there's no other instance in your adult life where you're back in that parent-child relationship and all of these things get brought up again. Yeah, it is. It is like an imprint, a little program.
And it's fear. Like if my daughter was having a tantrum in public, I'd be like, everyone's going to think I'm a bad mother. I can't get her under control. It was so deep within me of this like fear. Like no one said, well, you're going to have a lot of fear come up as a parent to me. I mean, no one ever talked about that. I didn't recognize that it was fear of what other people think, or people are going to think I'm bad, or she's never going to grow out of this, or she's going to be a detriment to society. You know, she's not going to have me. All the things. I mean, I just went down a road and I was so unconscious. Like, what do you think about all these fears that we have as parents that we're not even aware of sometimes?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the things that mindfulness helps with, because you start to become conscious of these things. You sit there in a meditation practice and then these thoughts come into your head, but you can see them. You're like, oh, look at that thought. Wow, that's bananas. I was thinking XYZ. That's really weird and interesting, right? Or, oh, that's a judgmental thought. Or, oh, I'm thinking 20 years in the future, and that's probably not true. So those are things that mindfulness practice really, really helps with. I think it's hard to see the thoughts. Our thoughts are like the mind thinks, just like the eyes see and the ears hear. It's just a constant thing. It's like a factory of thoughts. And I want to say right away, like a mindfulness practice does not involve stopping your thoughts. You would just be dead or have a lobotomy if that had happened. So we're not there. It's more about having this relationship with them or where you can see it. And so I think like normally in our normal circumstances, we're like in this waterfall of thoughts and the thoughts are just all around us. We're just totally underneath the waterfall of thoughts and they're just coming and they feel really, really true. They feel really, really real. We have to act on them right away. And this, of course, as a therapist, you're thinking, I know it's like, this is where we hold up the mirror. We get to see them. But also a mindfulness practice also helps us to like kind of step out in front of that waterfall and be like, oh, isn't that interesting? Or isn't that crazy? Or isn't that, maybe crazy is a wrong word here. Just looking at them and seeing them for what they are.
So you're like witnessing. I always say it's like
witnessing.
Kind of like if you think of a Times Square ticker, you're watching the ticker go by, but you're not like your thoughts. You're observing your thoughts that are outside of you. Would that be another way to describe mindfulness?
Absolutely.
Sometimes people use it, like that word gets thrown out so much, mindfulness, and people are like, well, what does that really mean? So what would you say to people? What does mindfulness really mean?
Well, it's making a choice to put your attention into the present moment. And that could be the present moment, putting it on your breath or the sounds you hear or the thoughts you're thinking, anything that is here in the present moment. So your choice to put your attention into the present moment. The last parts are very important, with kindness and curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
So with kindness, and another way to say curiosity is without judging, non-judgment. So this is just pretty different from the way we normally are, right?
We're so self-critical because that shame tells us you messed up and you're a horrible person and all these things. Well, how would you handle that? Let's use this as an example. Let's say their kid's having a tantrum or talking back and you lose your cool, you flip your lid, you get dysregulated and you yell at your kid. How would you interrupt that cycle? Like, what would you recommend for someone to begin to interrupt that cycle?
Let's say if you're in public, go to the car. Go. The day is a loss at this point. Just cut your losses, go home. But what I would say to interrupt that cycle, like if we've lost it, we've yelled and we're feeling terrible about it, this is the thing that the way mindfulness helps. It's about building our awareness, right? So what is happening in the present moment? Oh my God, I'm feeling terrible right now. I lost it. My kid's crying. Everybody's upset. This is a mess, right? So just even like kind of that acknowledgement of what is real right now, it actually can provide a lot of relief. This is what Dr. Dan Siegel calls name it to tame it. And they've done research that shows that it brings nervous system, psychological relief, takes the temperature down. It's proven to work. So we just acknowledge what's happening. Okay, this is a mess. I'm feeling terrible. My kid's crying. I'm upset. Boy, this was a terrible day. So in this moment, that is the mindfulness piece, is the like waking up to what's real. I'm thinking I'm a terrible parent. My kid's upset. Oh my gosh. And then I would say the next step then is that with kindness and curiosity, and that comes out of self-compassion. You can see me, Kirsten, touching my hand to my heart because that's what I do. And okay, so how can you be kind to yourself? Oh, how would I speak to my dear friend who is feeling this way right now? Oh man, that stinks. What a hard day. That was hard for you. So you can say that to yourself, even if it feels weird and awkward and it's not what you normally do. You can still try it. You can still practice it. It's a practice. It can grow stronger. Yeah. So you'd be kind to yourself. And then one thing you wouldn't do is you wouldn't say, I'm the only person in the world. What's wrong with me? You'd notice, oh, okay, I'm having those what's wrong with me thoughts. I'm having the thought of what's wrong with me. And actually, I'm going to remember this piece, common humanity. Even Kirsten would yell at her kids, or even Hunter has yelled at her kids. And there's 7 billion people in the world right now. Probably someone is feeling this way too. I'm not the only one. And then what's nice about that is as you interrupt the pattern, maybe the pattern would be, I'm a terrible parent. I suck. I'm miserable. And then you would just want to like hand your kids to your spouse, go in your room and watch Grey's Anatomy while you eat a tub of popcorn for 3 hours, right? You're no use to anybody. You've downward spiraled. Everything sucks. But if you can interrupt the pattern and you can be aware of the thoughts that are happening, be aware of the feelings, even though they're super uncomfortable, be aware of them, helps to start that emotional digestion process. And then be kind to ourselves. It's like, then maybe we even do it in the car while our kids scream outside the Target, whatever. Then we can say, oh man, this was a hard moment. And then we can then get back up again more quickly. Maybe even turn to our kid and say, that was a hard moment for you. I'm really sorry I yelled. And you're upset. I'm upset. This is hard. What can I do? Do you need a hug? So being kind to ourselves, practicing self-compassion, practicing the awareness of the thoughts and the feelings and all that's going on in that moment, it really helps us to just begin again. Because we got to, as parents, we have to begin, or grandparents or whatever, with kids, we have to begin anew with all our relationships, really. We have to begin anew again and again and again and again. That's part of being human. So,
a million times over. I've done so much repair. I think you just described a repair, with your child, and owning it, like taking full responsibility speaks volumes to them and their nervous system. Their nervous system goes, okay, it's like what our parents, and I'm not blaming our parents, but they didn't really go, I'm sorry, I got really dysregulated and I yelled and screamed and I spanked you. They didn't do that in the moment. That wasn't what they were taught. I don't even think they knew that was what they needed to do. They needed to be the authority. They needed to be in charge. They needed to be the disciplinarian. And so we're doing a repair. We're owning our own dysregulation.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't think our parents had those tools, which is why that forgiveness can come in a little bit more. It's like you didn't even have a hope to have those tools.
No, they had no idea that this was important. This is how we build connection with our kids. They just didn't know that.
I think it's also helpful to know that it's really not good if we're perfect anyway with our kids. Our kids need to see real humans struggle. They need to see you struggle. They need to know what it looks like to repair because they're going to need to do it. They're immature and loud and messy and unskillful, and they're going to be that way for a while. So they need to know how to do it. And it can actually bring you closer if you've had a conflict and then you repair than if you didn't have a conflict at all, which is really interesting. So for the parent who's then beating themselves up for not being perfect and for losing it again, you have permission to be human. You're not going to be otherwise. It's not possible. And it wouldn't be good for your kids if you were perfect. Then they would feel terrible because they're human.
And then they would think this is what I was supposed to be, perfect, and it doesn't exist. I think you said something really important that I want to highlight, that this is actually sometimes our dysregulation, when we can own it, teaches them how to do repair in relationships. So when I have couples in my office and they're like, I'm not saying sorry. I'm like, okay, we're going to have to really rewind the clock, because when we can self-reflect and get to that point as they grow up along the continuum, we teach them, oh, this is what repair looks like. And I know how to do it because my mom did it, my dad did it, or my whomever grandparent did it. They start to internalize that as part of their way to work in relationships.
Yeah, it's much more effective than the forced apology.
Too. Yeah, say you're sorry, apologize, and like, sorry. You don't really mean it.
Yeah, that's not that helpful. Yeah, the best way to teach your kid to say you're sorry is to legitimately apologize to them for you being human. Because you're going to be human.
And then I always say, and ask them how that felt. How do you feel? I get scared. You're scary, or you're, let them express what that's like for them. Now I want to talk about what made you want to write a book on raising good humans? Because that's what everybody wants when they parent. They're like, I just want a good human. I just want them to be a good human. How did this develop in your life to put it into a book?
Well, I was blogging like when I was at that time when Maggie was young, and I shared about my temper and I shared about my anger. And that was like such a relief for people to be like, oh, there's actually a mom talking about anger. Wow, it's so refreshing to see that I'm not alone in this. And I went into a period of intensive learning, became a certified mindfulness meditation teacher, a certified parent effectiveness training teacher. I really dove into like, I really was like, okay, I suck at this. I need some skills. And so I wanted to learn, I really needed to learn about lowering my reactivity and then what to say. Because then I definitely was guilty of being able to calm down and then saying something unskillful that my parents might have said. Then I was like, okay, obviously I need some communication skills as well here. So I had been continually kind of sharing about that and learning about that. And I started the podcast like in 2013. So I started learning and I had done a coaching training program. So I started coaching people on that. And at one point over the years, it was like a question in a book, like, what would you create if money were no object and everything were fine? What would you make for the world? And it was like, oh, I would make this mindful parenting course where it brings together the stuff from the mindfulness world about calming our reactivity and taking care of our feelings and all of this stuff that's so vital and such a foundation with the communication skills. And so that's kind of where it came about. And then the book and then Raising Good Humans came after that.
Did you come up with the title? Because that's...
No, I didn't. People love the title Raising Good Humans, but
It's
a copywriter at New Harbinger came up with it.
So what did you have as your original title?
Oh, I had a lot of really bad titles. It turns out I'm a very bad book titler. So
that's what pulls you in, was your title. I mean, you have a good title is everything, not everything, but it's a big deal.
It's a big deal. I feel incredibly grateful for my title.
Would you change it now?
No way. No way. But it's so funny because there's a Raising Good Humans podcast and she's been on my podcast and she said people are like, oh, I love your book. She's like, it's not my book.
Oh, that's wild. Yeah. So, okay, this is going to be like a big question. What are the top 3 things you think are important or necessary to raise a good human? Like out of all the things you've learned.
I would say self-awareness is the number one thing. Self-care and listening. Probably.
Okay. Self-awareness, self-care, and listening.
Self-awareness because you need to be aware of your feelings, your thoughts. That's mindfulness, right? Your feelings, your thoughts, your sensations, and what you're bringing to the table. What is it from your childhood and all of those things that you're bringing to this situation? When are you having a big reaction that is outsized from what is the child is doing? When are you like kind of telling yourself a story about how they're manipulating you or whatever? Like the awareness of those kind of thoughts and beliefs and all of that is incredibly important because we bring so much. Our lens is not clear. So if we can at least start to see those things, be aware of those things, we can interrupt them.
And then what are your top 3? I love top 3s. You're probably like, oh, lady. I love the top 3s. What are your top 3 things that you've implemented in your life? You talked about mindfulness, like practically, what does that look like? The top 3 things you do as a parent, what would they be?
Okay, so practical tools. I love practical tools. I mean, for me, I think it's very, very practical to practice a little mindfulness every day. If you don't like sitting still for 5 minutes, like go for a slow walk up and down your street for 5 minutes. Or before you pick up your child from school, sit in the car and instead of flicking through Instagram, like listen to a 3-minute guided meditation. Like there are these kind of pockets of time, like slow yourself down. I would say that. And then I would go back to that. The number 2 from the 1 is like that self-care. Like you have to, all of your best parenting is in modeling. If you can model, I'm not talking self-care. Like people think of like mani-pedis, and that's not what I'm talking about. It means like giving yourself time to maybe read a novel and let your kids be bored while you read a novel. Only do 1 craft project for Christmas or Easter or whatever. Give yourself permission to be an individual outside of the role of parent. And that's wonderful modeling. You don't want to model for your kids that they become a parent and then their life ends. You're not going to want to have any kids. You have no grandkids. You got to model that you can have a life that feels good to you, right? That you do things that take care of yourself, right? To do that. I go Scottish country dancing now that my kids are teenagers, sometimes 3 nights a week.
For you.
But then self-awareness, self-care, and then listening. I mean, so that requires that you're not just like listening is like, that is like the best gift we can give to our kids. All they want from us is, do you see me? Do you hear me? Right? That's what you do as a therapist. That's why people love it so much. They feel so fulfilled, right? When they go to therapy, because someone is really listening to them. Someone is really present and really listening to them. It's an incredible gift in this incredibly distracted world. So part of mindfulness practice means being able to sit and like listen in such a way so that you're not just listening to jump in and say what you want to say next. You're really listening. You're noticing what they're saying, what they're not saying. You're noticing all the things you notice when you're listening to a person with curiosity and kindness. And that is such a great gift to our kids. And when we do it when they're little, the cool thing is they continue to talk to us when they're 14 and 15 and 16 and 17, right? Like they really know that you listen. And that is like this magic sauce for parenting. And that it's like the deposits and the emotional bank account. It's what really helps them want to listen to you and want to cooperate with you, is because you show you really love and care for them by listening. So Thich Nhat Hanh, the Zen master I mentioned earlier, he has a quote that really resonates with me. And I share it often, but I'd love to share it here because it's so appropriate. He says, when you love someone, the best thing you can offer is your presence.
Yeah.
How can you love if you are not there? How can you love if you are not there? You can't really love your kids if you're always going, doing, feeling not good enough and trying to do more to fit more in so that you can feel like you're a worthy human being. You're already a worthy human being. Just sit down, sit with the discomfort of being a human and listen to yourself, listen to your kids.
Yeah. And put our phones down.
Yeah.
Put the phones down and look at the, really connect softly at them. It makes a huge difference with their nervous systems. If you're regulated and you're calm and you're tender and you're warm, they're like you said, they come talk to you. They want that presence. They crave that presence because it helps them feel settled too.
We we feel each other's feelings. We're not just separate autonomous individuals floating around. Like we feel what each other's feeling. Then back to self-awareness and self-care. When you calm down, you can give your kids some calm. All of that. It's all in a virtuous cycle as we start to practice. And we don't have to be perfect. We don't have to be perfect.
And that's the key piece you're saying. Like there is no perfect. So it's how do we navigate when we do get dysregulated or when something comes up, that self-awareness, self-care and listening really help us build that connection. So we have humans that can do the same out in the world. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we want. We want our human, they're not ours, but we're ushering them through that they can go out in the world and be that to other people too. They can be open and calm and loving and present. And that's a gift that keeps on giving.
Yes.
And they're going to have struggles and that's the hard part as parents. We want to protect them from all these struggles. And the reality is we can't.
Yeah. And we shouldn't. When they have little struggles when they're kids, this is another thing. Don't jump in to solve all their problems. Don't do it because they need those little struggles.
That's so true. That's so hard.
They need to be able to, oh, wow, that's frustrating. Yeah, that's frustrating. I hear you. Rather than going in to solve that problem because you can't, it's going to be bad if your kids get to be 18 and they always have their parents solve their problems. No, we got to give them that vote of confidence in their ability by letting them struggle.
Yeah, let them. I think Mel Robbins said that or something. Let them. Like if something, just let them have their own struggle, whatever that looks like. And I think critical thinking skills on their own as part of that individuation separation stage and development is so imperative. So they can problem solve when they have that prefrontal cortex fully developed. It's no threat to me if they have a different opinion than I have. Great. Let them explore what their own thoughts, feelings are instead of us telling them what they should think and feel.
Yeah. I mean, and I've talked to Robert Sapolsky, he's a great scientist and author of this great book, Behave. He's saying, we all know like now that the prefrontal cortex doesn't develop until our kids are like 25 or something. And he's like, well, why doesn't it develop until they're 25? Because it needs experience. It needs time and experience. So they need those experiences. That's why it takes so long. So don't deprive your kid of those experiences.
Yeah. And now they're saying it's 28 with technology. Like development,
Boy.
it won't fully develop until like 28. This is brand new as in the last year or two. I was like,
Wow.
whoa, that just goes to show how much it's changing the brain and development. And we don't want to make it all bad. It's not all bad or all good. It's just we're noticing now the impact. Oh, it's like you have to take a breath on that one. So it's interesting. As we close out, you have mentioned a few books, but if you could pick one book that has made the biggest difference, and it doesn't have to be a parenting book or anything, in your personal growth in life, what would it be?
I guess I would pick the first book I read by Thich Nhat Hanh. And that first one I've given to people so many times. I love it. It's called Being Peace. And it's just very gentle, very user-friendly. It's everyone friendly. You could just read it and it'll help you feel regulated, but it's a really great book.
I love that. Thank you. Is there anything we didn't cover that you think is really important about raising good humans?
I guess I would say that it's never too late to start to try to practice some of these. And raising good humans, I have all these practices and skills. It's never, never too late. I had a woman who is a grandmother take my mindful parenting class that I had taught in this low-income community in Delaware. She took it because she was taking care of her 6-year-old grandson. And she came to me and she said afterwards, yeah, things with the grandson are going a lot better. Things are smoother, more cooperation. That's great. But the thing that she told me about that was so heartwarming is that she told me that she's healed things with her adult daughter because of the tools that were taught that are in raising good humans. And to me, I was just like, wow. I mean, it was a huge, huge moment because people say, oh, my kid's 12. Is it too late? My kid's 14. Is it too late? It's never, never too late.
Never.
We can always become more self-aware, kinder, more skillful, better listeners. It will always help.
Yes. Have your parents read your book, and do they implement it?
My mother has read the book.
And it's okay if they have it. I mean, it's just, yeah.
No, it's not okay. It's not okay with me that my father has not read the book. But that'd be a whole nother episode. That's a whole other episode. No, it's not a hard book to read, Dad. Anyway, no, my mom has read it. And yeah, I think she's always been on this continual path of learning, and it's been inspiring for me. So that's been really good. And I continue to practice, awareness and forgiveness when I'm in my best state with my dad.
I think this is so real to have this conversation because that's the realness. Clients, a lot of times their parents aren't going to do that. They aren't going to do it. And I don't mean to, but it's just the reality.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're willing to talk about it speaks volumes. I mean, your mom's willing to look within, and usually there's a parent that's not. I mean, and then we have to rumble through the grief. We have to rumble through the feeling of powerlessness and then working towards forgiveness if we can. And if we can't, that's okay too. So it's just a journey. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, that is the reality.
It is. And people are like, can I find healing even if my parent doesn't do the work? I'm like 100%.
Yeah.
100%. Now, will there be elements that'll keep coming up? Yes, because we're humans. Yeah. And that's why you have the word human in your book title. I think it's a key point because we're humans. I love that's in your book title.
It's the messy middle. Like mindfulness is often talked about in many contexts as the middle path. And I think that's true. And the edges are easier. If I'm all extreme on one side, it's clearer, it's easier. The middle is a little messy. It's a little back and forth. And that's what it is to be human, though. It's messy.
It is. When we can say it and bring it to the light, we can take a deep breath. So thank you so much, Hunter, for being on the podcast. Where can people find you if they're interested? We'll definitely link all your books in the show notes. Where can they find you beyond that?
Thank you, Kirsten. I mean, this has been a pleasure. If you're a podcast listener, go listen to the Mindful Parenting Podcast. We've been going for 10 years.
Woohoo!
So much there.
So much content when you've been going for 10, I know. Because
my goodness. And everything else, you can find me at mindfulmamamentor.com.
So how many episodes are you in now?
500 something.
Yeah, I'm halfway. I think I'm 280 something. I've been going since 2018. So That's awesome. Congratulations.
Awesome. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. And to have 3 books under your belt, I mean, really, congrats. I mean, workbooks and books, and congratulations. Thank you so much for spreading your love and kindness and knowledge in the world. And we're grateful for you, Hunter.
Thank you, Kirsten. This has been a real pleasure. And to bring it back to that listening. So nice to feel really listened to, that you're giving that gift to, I'm sure, your clients and to me today too. Thank you.
Thanks, Hunter. I appreciate you. I know I do my hand on my heart too. So when you said that, I'm like, kindred spirits. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening to the Close the Chapter podcast. My hope is that you took home some actionable steps along with motivation, inspiration, and hope for making sustainable change in your life. If you enjoyed this episode, click the subscribe button to be sure to get the updated episodes every week and share with a friend or a family member. For more information about how to get connected, visit Kirsten, KRISTEN, Boyce, BOICE.com. Thanks and have a great day.